Hi everyone. Sorry about that. I was having some computer issues this morning, of course. Okay, so this is the travel expense form. I emailed it out this morning, so definitely check your email, but you should have this. And so I did my best to highlight the areas that you're going to kind of be filling in. Just because it can be a little bit confusing. So the first thing that's really important here, especially for those of you that are driving, and again, this process is really only eligible for those that are traveling more than 50 miles for the training. So just keep that in mind. So the biggest thing with the travel reimbursement process is that our policy is that we reimburse mileage, which means that we do not directly reimburse gas prices. But what mileage does is that it covers the cost of gas as well as general wear and tear on your car. So it should help, it should fully cover your gas expenses. It should also help you, if you need to do an oil change or, that's kind of the purpose of mileage reimbursement, is that it's not just covering gas, it's covering that wear and tear on your car because you're using your car for work purposes. So that's one thing I wanted to start out with, just because it can be confusing when people are like, oh, why can't I turn in my gas receipt? And this is why. It's we just want to know where you're going, what the distance is. So for this form, you're going to start off by filling out the top here. So put your name and your mailing address. So this can be different than what you've already provided to us, but just know this address is where your reimbursement check is going to be sent in the mail. It's not direct deposit, unfortunately. So this address could be, maybe you want it to be directly sent to your work office or to where you're currently living or to, somewhere else. I'm not sure. Just know that this address is going to be important because this is where they're going to send this reimbursement check. Okay. So provide the address and then your phone number. You don't need to put your social security number because you're already in our payroll system. So you don't need to provide that, but some folks do just because, but don't feel like you have to. Okay. The description here I've already provided for you. So this is for our VISTA program kickoff. So you don't have to change that. It's not highlighted yellow, so don't touch it. For the dates, I already put those in there. They shouldn't really change. So I just put in, 7/22, which is Monday. You'll be traveling to Minneapolis. So that's where our training's being held. That's where we're staying at the hotel. So to Minneapolis, and then you're going to type in, I'll highlight it. You're going to type in your, the city that you're traveling from. So if you're living in Grinnell, Iowa, you would put Grinnell, Iowa, things like that. And so how we do the miles is I literally just type it in whenever I have to do this for myself. I just Google Maps it. So I put in my destination and then you just put in the miles. You can round up if you want. So if it's 135.7, you can just say 136. That's fine. We will they usually do double check at the office just so that if it's 135 miles and you put 200, they're well, what are you doing with those extra miles? So just keep in mind that this is literally just from point A to point B. So if you, for some reason, let's say over the weekend, you're visiting family in Marshall, Minnesota, and then from Marshall, you're traveling there. We only can reimburse the mileage or will reimburse the mileage from your work address, so where you are working, the city that you're working in for VISTA, to the training address, so Minneapolis. So you can't add any extra trips in there. I'll be double checking them when you submit them, as well as our financial office usually double checks them too. So just keep that in mind, is that it needs to be point A to point B. You shouldn't have to put anything in for travel on Tuesday because we're just staying in Minneapolis, so you wouldn't have to put that. And then for Wednesday, you'll of course just put that you're traveling from Minneapolis to, and then again, this is your like address where you are currently working as a VISTA. So if you like make some pit stops on your way back home, that's totally fine, but just know it needs to be point A to point B, and that is considered where we're having the training and where you are serving your VISTA term. Make sense?
I do have a question.
Yes.
So I work in Marshall, but I live in Lind, and that's a little town about 6 miles away. Do I put in Marshall because my work site is there, or do I put in Lind because I'm leaving from there?
You're going to put in Marshall because that's where you are working.
Okay,
yes,
gotcha.
Good question. Good question. So again, you put it should be the same mileage for like you're traveling to and then from. And again, we really shouldn't see anything happening on Tuesday because we're just staying in Minneapolis for the training. So then I'm going to move over to meals. Oh, and just so you know too, it automatically calculates what your mileage reimbursement is, which it's like 50 cents or 56 cents or something odd like that. So if I do like 200 here, it'll automatically come up here. So you don't even have to calculate it. So you don't have to worry about that. So then for meals, again, I kind of highlighted the ones I'm anticipating that you will need. So obviously if you're like leaving really early because you have like a 4-hour trip or something and you grab breakfast along the way or like a snack or something, you can put that on here. So you'll just put like, let's say it's like $7.20. So it'll come up, you'll put that there. Same thing. So we are providing lunch. So anytime that we with the training are providing a meal, which that was included in the agenda that we sent out, we won't be able to reimburse you for those meals because we're providing them. So if you have issues or concerns where you're like, oh, I don't know if you're going to be able to meet my dietary needs, or oh, I just have a really unique situation, please let us know because we want to make sure that we're feeding you what you can and eat and what you need to be eating. So we'll always try to handle that in advance, but just know if it's something where we're like providing meals for you, then we shouldn't be seeing that here on the reimbursement form because we're trying to kind of cover that cost already. So you most likely won't put anything, or you shouldn't be putting anything for Monday for lunch and dinner. So it'll just be whatever if you have a breakfast cost on the road. So the important thing with meals is that we have to have itemized receipts. So I have an example of that. So let me pull it up. But what I mean by itemized is that, sometimes if you go to like a sit-down restaurant or something and they give you like the credit card check or the receipt and you like put your tip on there, that only has the credit card transaction. It won't have, what exactly you ate and where you ate it, things like that. So I have an example just to kind of help show us a little bit. So this is an itemized receipt, in case you're not familiar with that language. It just means basically that it has like the information of the organization. Usually it will have their like address and contact information, but really what we're looking for is, so this is a parking ticket example, but it will have a lot of lines. So it will show like that let's say you went to like a Mexican restaurant, it was like you ordered like one soft drink, which was $2. So it'll have that item line. You ordered like one enchilada, which was like $2 or whatever it is. That's not right, but you know what I'm saying. So it'll like break it down. Basically, it'll have item by item, which is why it's called itemized. Item by item, what you ordered, and the cost for that item, and then we'll have sales tax and things like that. So that'll be fine, and it will show your payment method. So that's what we need. If you don't provide an itemized receipt, then you won't be reimbursed for it. Just know that. The other thing with this, and this is really more about when we're talking about, so on Tuesday, we'll be having not a group dinner, but we'll just be going out for like a group like social time. So we'll have some appetizers and things, but most likely you'll be like eating your main meal by yourself that evening. And so, if you do decide to have like an alcoholic beverage, that's totally fine. we don't have any rules around that. The only rule for reimbursement then is that you won't be reimbursed for any alcohol. So it can be all on one receipt, but you would just have to go in and do the math yourself for like, okay, you know, my beer was like $5. I would just subtract that from my total and make sure that I noted that on the receipt, and do that. If you have any specific questions, especially after next week, we can always review them. But just those are a few things that I wanted to make sure to mention. So you have to have an itemized receipt or you won't get reimbursed. Alcohol will never be reimbursed, but it can be on the same receipt if you want. You just have to do the math and subtract that for the form. And then the other thing with eating out is that we only reimburse up to 15% for tips. So anything over the 15% you can obviously do, but just know you won't be reimbursed for that, and they will do the math if you don't do it. So just know that will happen. Yes. Any questions about meals or that process?
Hey, Monique.
Yeah. Hi, Justin.
Everyone, just in case if you don't know, I'm Justin Ellis. I'm the Director of Development here at Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact, and I work closely with Monique and Eric and Jacqueline, who I saw in there as well. Would it be helpful if I showed some examples of what a completed form looks like? I've got a couple pulled up on my screen that I'm working with now.
I will stop sharing so that you can share.
All right. So these are both mine, so I'm not putting under any pressure here. So this is one that I submitted back in January. So that just so you can see what a completed one looks like. You can see where I went to, where I was traveling from, the mileage, lunch receipts in there. In this case, there's that, and then the description of travel, which is really important. I can't remember if that was on the form that you shared, Monique, but make sure that it's travel to the VISTA training event is kind of what it comes down to. And then here's the receipt, which was not a itemized receipt, so I might have not got that $8.50. So I probably didn't get that money back. Here's the second one right here, travel to Cedar Rapids for this particular event. You can see the mileage. Then I also had parking on there as well. That's a miscellaneous expense. You might have something that isn't hotel or meals or something like that. That would fall into that. So if those sorts of things pop up, and then there's the itemized receipt, and it says $4.50 on there somewhere. So.
Yeah, that's a really good example of like an itemized parking receipt. Unlike your last one, Justin.
Yep, there you go. $4.50. Now it's not upside down.
Yeah. So again, this is good because it's showing you, like, it showed you like where it was at, the total amount that you charged it to your card, things like that. So yes.
Can I make an additional note?
Yes.
If you're concerned about separating alcohol from a ticket, just ask for 2 separate tickets. Servers who serve alcohol, they're typically asked that. So yeah. Just ask for 2 separate tickets. You could pay twice, but then you don't have to do the math, and then you can keep your receipts completely clean, essentially.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. If you forget to do that, it's not a big deal, but yeah, you can always ask that. So thank you. So when we're looking at this, again, I tried to highlight the areas where you most likely will be placing information. And so just know that like we've already covered the hotel expenses directly. So we shouldn't see anything from you here. Like if you, for whatever reason, feel like you want to stay somewhere else, like that's probably going to be something out of pocket for you. We would have to talk about that, but just know you shouldn't have anything here because we are already covering that as the program. And then miscellaneous expenses, like Justin just showed, would be parking. We should hopefully have parking covered, but like let's say you go out for dinner Tuesday night and you like end up paying for parking. If it's coins and a meter, we can't really do anything about that. But if you get a receipt like we showed, we can do that. So you would just put that here. So that'd be like $2, or it's really low for parking, and that's just the number I seem to like today. But you would just put parking here. So that's a miscellaneous expense. But that's about it. So again, if the other thing to note here is like if you're carpooling, you still will need to submit this. So even if you're not driving yourself, you're carpooling with someone else who's driving, that person will obviously be putting in mileage. So the only difference between someone who's driving and someone who's just kind of riding along is that that person who's just riding along won't put any miles in, because miles indicates that you were driving. So if you're just riding along, but you're still obviously traveling, right? So because you have travel expenses, like if you have breakfast or dinner, we need to know like what you were traveling, like where and then why, which is that description up here. So just know like you can still submit this even if you're not, and you should still submit one even if you're not driving yourself and you're carpooling. If you don't end up having any related expenses because you're like bringing snacks or whatever, or like you have family up there and you have dinner with them on Tuesday, like that's fine. You don't need to submit one, but just know that you should plan on submitting one if you, even if you're just carpooling. The other thing to note, I see that I have something in the chat, so I'll get to that in a second, is that so you're going to print this off when it's all done. It will automatically total up down here, so I'll just put in some more numbers so it looks a little bit different. So see how it kind of totals everything up here, and then it has a grand total at the bottom. So that is the amount that you will be reimbursed for. So you're going to sign it over here. And again, this needs to be an actual signature. So you're going to need to print this out, sign it, or use like a PDF thing where you can sign it electronically. Put the date and then put your phone number. I do recommend doing that in case they have any questions when they're looking at this. The other thing to keep in mind is that, so anytime you're putting something for like meals or like miscellaneous, that's when you're going to need to provide a receipt. And so when you provide a receipt, you're going to staple, or you're going to, since you're scanning this, you're going to need to like scan the receipt, kind of like what Justin had showed earlier, and include that all in the same document that you're going to send to us. So make sure that you have the receipts, that you're scanning them with this when you're ready to send it over for approval. If we don't see those receipts, and we'll make sure that we're checking, we'll just let you know. I have in the past too, like personally, like forgotten a receipt. Sometimes you're able to call that place and say, hey, I was there at this time. My really card record shows that I spent this amount. Can you please like send me the receipt? So if you're like really worried about that, you can usually contact them, and the business is like able to work with you most often on getting you the actual receipt. And then, so you're signing it, and then just note, since this is a process through Iowa Western, right, who's our fiscal host, your site supervisor should not be signing this. Our executive director, Emily Shields, will be the one signing it. So you're just gonna sign it, then you're going to scan this signed copy as well as those receipts that you're trying to get reimbursed for, all in one document. You're gonna send it to me, and then Justin and I are gonna work with Emily to get everything like approved and make sure that everything looks good. So just note, that's the other thing I wanted to note, and then don't mess with the account number, because that's just like our internal process that, really shouldn't be changing. So in the chat box, let me just get out of the screen share here for a second. All right, so there is a question. Can you clarify why we aren't reimbursing meals for people that travel less than 50 miles away? Justin, do you want to talk about the policy?
Yep. So according to the federal government, you aren't in travel status. So you are in your hometown. And so you have food that is available to you at your house, or wherever it is that you would normally eat a meal. So by that standard, since we're not providing any sort of training or anything like that during that time, they're assuming that you would eat a meal as you normally would. So that's why we're not covering that meal for people who are in town.
So for those that are traveling under 50 miles, no, you will not need to submit this reimbursement form. Good question. So another question was, is it 50 miles one way or total travel miles? That's just one way. So, right, Justin, that's one way.
Yep, the location has to be 50 miles away from where you are. So 100 miles round trip if you're going there and back. Sometimes you're not always going there and back. Sometimes you're going there and then you're going somewhere else.
Yeah. And then do we cut reimbursement checks as they come in, or is there a specific day that cuts and funds are dispersed? Yes. So these are going to be due to me. I'm asking that you submit them on Friday. So next Friday, the 26th. If you need a little bit more time, that's fine. But just know, Emily Shields, so she's our executive director, she'll have to sign these, so it'll kind of depend a little bit on that. But just know it generally takes about 3 to 5 weeks anyway for that process to go through, because we have to internally look at it, review it, approve it, and then we send it over to the Iowa Western accounting office, or right, Justin? And they're the ones who kind of do the final thing. And again, it's coming in the mail, it's not direct deposit. So again, it's going to take a little bit more time because it's being sent in the mail. Any other insight on that, Justin? That was a good question.
I mean, all of what you said is true, and we do submit them as we receive them. So there isn't a specific date of the month where checks are paid out. The 3 to 5 weeks is in case, I would say, if there's a lot of problems, it would be more like 3 to 5 weeks. But if everything is kind of lined up and smooth, then it goes a lot faster than that. So, and that's true for most cases. But it's good to err on the side of just to make sure that we have all the information there. Go back and forth. So.
Yes. So I will send out another reminder next week. We can talk about this form if you want to bring it with you or whatever. At the training, we can review that. Just know we'll be available to help answer any questions. It is kind of confusing, especially if you're doing it for the first time, which most of you are. So just know that. But just the other thing to know is if you are eligible, so you're driving more than 50 miles, the one way, and you don't submit this, we just know that we might not catch that, and so it's really going to be on you to be submitting it if you want to be reimbursed. So just please note that I'm not going to be emailing you every day saying please get this to me. It's if you want to be reimbursed, you should be kind of on top of that. So that's just one thing. I'm not saying that to be mean or anything. I'm just saying realistically, we might not have that capacity to just be tracking down every single person that we think needs to be reimbursed. So if you want to be reimbursed, please make sure you're working on this process and you're communicating with us, with someone on our staff team, okay? I think that's all the general information I had. Justin, can you think of anything else that we need to discuss?
No, I think maybe the only other thing I would mention, so for those of you who are traveling from particularly far away, if you want to get a rental car, you're welcome to do that. If you're going from Iowa up to Minnesota or vice versa, and you don't want to use your personal vehicle, you're welcome to do that. And we certainly encourage carpooling. That just makes it a little bit easier to fill out the form. Then we're just reimbursing the cost of the car rental, and they give you a receipt for that. And obviously it has to be the basic car rental. It can't be anything sort of fancy. So don't show up in a rented Lexus, as much fun as that would be. And then any gas that would be you would use for that rental vehicle, we would reimburse as well. For your personal vehicle, we do not reimburse gas purchases or gas costs whatsoever. So we're giving you mileage, and that assumes that gas is part of that those expenses.
Yes. All right. Are there any other questions that people have for us for our last couple of minutes together? If you do have any questions, especially, before next week or even next week or whenever you're completing the form, just know you can email us. More so like me, because I have a lot more direct experience working on this process exactly, or Justin, obviously. But just know you can always reach out to us. We get that it's kind of confusing. And so we don't want that to feel like a burden for you, that you're just like aren't getting it, or that we're going to feel like you're asking the same question 5 times. We don't care. We just want to be able to make sure you have the information that you need to get reimbursed for what you need to be reimbursed for. That's our ultimate goal. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Again, I'm recording this, so I'll be sharing it out with those that weren't able to join, or if you, for some reason, want to like look at it again or feel like you need to, just let me know. But also try to send out some detailed, like a bullet list of instructions on generally how to complete the form and the process involved. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording, and then I can